Okay, so before we experience these little technical difficulties, Gwen, you were telling us about your personal grooming process. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so once we started dating and as things began to get serious, everything was fine. We were traveling, we were doing things. I did notice I was being a little more separated from my family and my choir, you know, at the time in my church, because I was not a member of his church.
Mhm.
So, but my group had a concert one night. Billy Rivers and the Angelic Voices of Faith.
Yep.
Shout out to them.
Shout out.
And we had a concert one night, and he didn't come to the concert that night. So I left the concert. I went to his house, and when I walked in the door, he slapped me. Now he had never, you know, I had never seen any physical violence or anything. And it was like we had an unspoken rule that we were not separated like more than 3 hours from each other than work. And you keep in mind, within that 7-year period, I left my job at Federal Express, might I mention, and went to work for his business and the church. So it was like that night, I guess I must have stayed at church too long. I'm not sure what it was, but he hit me and I saw stars.
Jesus.
I saw stars. So, and it was at that point that I was like, okay, I've been hit by a man. And my dad had only hit me once in my life. So that's when the first time I ever thought that it may be a domestic situation. Now, it didn't happen for years after that.
Wow.
That's the reason, one reason why the relationship, and I tell people all the time, physical domestic violence usually does not happen every day. You just never know when it's going to happen. And you don't know how long it's going to last.
Wow.
So was there something, Nicole, help me remember, was there something that the guy was talking about, like, you know, the severity of it, like, you know, when the physical part is really severe, that's when you see stuff like every day. But he was kind of like in alignment with what Gwen is saying. It's not necessarily something you see regularly unless there's this level of severity, right? Where somebody's always, and now those are the people that I think it's harder for them to protect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing is the victim is living on constant eggshells.
Yep. And tailoring their behavior.
Yep, because you don't know, and anything could be a trigger to an abuser. And you know, some things you learn, okay, if I do this, if I do that, but your mind is constantly trying to concentrate on what I should and should not do, what I should say and shouldn't say, what I should wear, you know, how I should act, what, you know. So it's a constant mental war going on, even when you're not being physically hit or hurt.
I want us to stay right there. Let's go to break. We'll be right back. We're here with Ms. Gwendolyn Turner. We're talking domestic violence. We'll be back on 94.7 FM in a moment. And we are still here on 94.7 FM, and we are glad that you are still here. We're talking all things domestic violence today with Ms. Gwendolyn Turner. So, you know, it's really interesting to me. I mean, I think I'm a people watcher, right? And I notice when I'm around people, you know, how folks interact with each other, you know, particularly how couples interact with each other. And, you know, like, let's just say, for instance, if I were out somewhere with Nicole and her boyfriend, and he, you know, I ask her a question and she doesn't answer unless she looks at him first, you know, like maybe kind of getting approval, right? That it's okay to answer.
Absolutely.
Or I ask her a question and he answers for her. He jumps in to answer the question for her.
Mhm.
You notice these things, and I'm not gonna lie, I have been so quick to say in my lifetime, I don't know how in the world somebody could even, like, I would never put up with that, or I would, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why they
Right.
say never, because all the situations are different and they're unique. It could be me.
Absolutely.
As strong as I think I am, it could be me, because depending on what the grooming process looked like and how you're drawn in, and how much you buy in, and as my dad says a lot,
Absolutely.
How much you drink the Kool-Aid,
Absolutely.
you really might
Absolutely.
get stuck in a situationship for real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I never thought, I had never even used the words domestic violence. But I met this person. I was so young, I was 17 when I met him, and we started dating probably college 19, 20. But and I grew up in the church, and he was a pastor, so I was, like any other girl my age, young girl, you want the husband, the 2.5 children, the puppy, and the white picket fence, and all of that. And I done prayed, fasted, spoke in tongues, turn around 3 times, all of this. I'm thinking this is my God sent. So, but and then realizing that's the reason when I came out of the relationship, I was not angry with him. I was angry with myself. How could you stay in this long? How could you live like this long? And keep in mind, during that period of time, I really felt like I was in love with this man. So you go through that process. I'm gonna pray it away. I'm gonna pray it out. But that person has to have the desire to change and realize what they're doing. So it can happen. And then I think about some clients that I have worked with in the past. I'll never forget, the oldest couple that I worked with was 90 and 91 in an abusive relationship.
Wow. A couple things that you just mentioned I think are really interesting. First of all, the age difference you mentioned, and that is not always a red flag, right? I'm not saying that, but
Right.
it can often be if there's a much older man and a younger woman.
Absolutely.
There's already that huge power differential between the two just based on the age.
Absolutely.
And then I remember you mentioning that he was well off as well when you first met him.
Absolutely.
And again, not always a red flag for somebody who's going to be an abuser, but they may be more likely to feel entitled and to be able to, treat people how they want just based on the amount of money they make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was afforded to do things. There's nowhere in the United States that I've wanted to go that I haven't been. I mean, even the day that I decided this relationship was over, I had $2.17. I left fur coats. I left diamonds. I took my dog, and all I wanted was my peace of mind.
Yeah.
I needed the peace of mind, and I needed to get back to me. But yeah, sometimes those things can be red flags. So, but I tell people all the time, abuse can really happen to anybody. It won't happen to everybody, but it can happen to anybody. But everybody knows somebody that's experiencing domestic violence. Especially here in Shelby County, in Memphis, because it is just rampant. It's rampant.
Yeah, I think we had talked couple shows ago, maybe, or maybe it was with the gentleman who runs the Domestic Violence Center in Nashville. And I think we were talking about what happens in the brain when a person is really good to you, and then they're really horrible to you, and then they're really good to you and horrible. We talk a lot about that, all those hormones that are released, that really do work to create that trauma bond.
Absolutely.
That can happen to anybody.
Absolutely.
Anybody.
And I tell people all the time, when there's a battle between the head and the heart, because you can know in your mind and in your head that this is something I need, this is not good for me, this is not even good to me anymore, you know, but your heart, you know, a lot of times your heart wins out over your head, you know. So when that, and that's a terrible war, that's a terrible conflict within yourself.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier something about the abuser needing to want to change in order to change.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know a lot of people have questions, like, especially women or men who might be in it, they might say, because I think they can change, or I want them to change. So, so do abusers, are they able to change?
Sure. Yes. I know couples that were in abusive relationships with each other, and they went to counseling and they did whatever it is they need to do, and it has worked out for them. But first, one thing that both the victim and the abuser must realize is the abuser must first realize that he's abusive. The victim must realize she's a victim or he's a victim before any help can come on either side.
So it's just like
a hard decision.
So it's just like addiction, right?
Absolutely.
It's the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
And until an abuser, because a lot of times, and one of the I went to counseling for several years after this relationship, and I actually worked in the counseling center that I went to. But one part that I had to do was I had to go and investigate as much of the history of my abuser as I could. Because a lot of times there is a reason behind what happened in their childhood or growing up, or what past relationships or whatever that got you to this point. Sometimes you can find out, sometimes you can't. Of course, I found out a whole lot of things, and because our relationship was so long, there were some things that I knew. And the same thing with victims. A lot of people say victims draw what they saw. That was not my case. I had never seen abuse. I had never seen domestic violence. My parents didn't curse each other out. You know, it wasn't that kind of party in my house. So, you know, I didn't really know the red flags. And like I said, for all these years, I had never been hit. He had never cursed me or anything. We did a lot of traveling. He did a lot of things to keep me preoccupied. As I look back, I was preoccupied so much with good things that when the bad things came and hit me face to face, you know, it was kind of hard, you know, and you think, oh, it's not going to happen again. It's not, you know, and then you find yourself in this cycle.
And then those things, those good things, right, are the things that that make the onlookers, as Dr. West says, paint the red flags white and say, "Oh, he's good to her." You know, I mean, it's probably not what I'm thinking, because he takes her out of town all the time. He buys her all these furs, and he does this and he does that. So I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, ignore what I see, because what I think I see ain't what I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about men and abuse.
Okay.
Let's just dive into that, because again, we don't normally think about men being abused.
No, and that's such a hard conversation to have. And I'm glad that now it's being talked about more and more, because we know statistics tell us that 1 in 4 women will suffer abuse. 1 in 3 of that 1 in 4 will die as a result of that abuse. And that's a national statistic, but it's also a statistic that is very true for Memphis and Shelby County. But what we
Okay.
don't talk about is 1 in 8 men
Mhm.
are reporting.
Hmm.
So, we just talking about reported. You
Yeah.
don't know how many go under the radar. And the same thing with women, but women, it's just more common for women. Until not so many years ago, when MPD implemented the diversity training deal where they could teach police officers sensitivity when it related to going to a domestic case and the female was the aggressor. Because I've heard stories of men say, well, she was hitting me, she was doing this, that, and the other, and da 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 da. And police came to the house and said, oh, you can't handle your household.
Yeah.
So
And here's
it
another
was-
thing. Here's another thing that I need you to address as you go through this. How we grew up. You and I are in the same, age bracket. We grew up with boys being told you don't hit girls.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 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 So, and so many of them, and there's someone that I really, but Kevin Phelps. But anyway,
Yeah.
you must talk to him. His testimony is so powerful, because he walks through the process of being married and being a victim of abuse.
Mhm.
And not being able to, because he grew up, you don't hit women.
Mhm.
You don't do that under any circumstances. But now men are reporting it more. And one thing I will say, men are very vicious. Women are very methodical. I mean, we do some long suffering things where we can be very treacherous in what we do to men. And a lot of times it's usually because I'm finding in working in the courts that a lot of times when women abuse and it's reported as abuse, of course, it's about the other baby mama.
Okay.
So even if there's a friction there, don't go on his job and set his car on fire. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
So,
please.
but women can be very abusive as well. And I always try to make it clear that this is a kind of a balancing act. It does not mean that the man is always the aggressor, but it's hard for men to even verbalize being abused.
I had one guy tell me that he was with a female that was abusive. And when he finally made up his mind to call the police, they got there and she said that he had hit her. There were
That happens.
there were no scars from, with either, right?
Yeah.
And but they immediately took her word.
Yeah.
Right.
And that happens, which is another reason why men are not quick to report it.
Right.
Mm.
And if they do report it, they have to do things like make sure the camera phone is going, or because they need something, because a lot of times women will come and say, no, the only reason why I did that is because he hit me. He started it. He was the aggressor. I was defending myself.
So because of the way that men are typically socialized, they, one, are taught not to hit a woman regardless. But then if they are the ones that are being abused, we also socialize them not to talk about it, because it somehow makes them, quote, less of a man.
Weak.
Or weak. Yes. So we are, all around, we're doing men a disservice.
Absolutely.
From the time they're little boys until the time they are grown men.
Absolutely. 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 I do agree with that statement. And one of the things that I talk about sometimes is the seeds that we plant in our children. You know, even as toddlers, you know, we think it's funny when the little boy pushed the little girl down in the playground or pull her hair. But what we don't realize is, you know, no, they're not just playing. This is telling her it's okay for a little boy to push me down or pull my hair. And it's telling him it's okay to push her down or, you know, pull her hair. So we have to really be careful on, you know, on how we plant those seeds, even in the very, very, very young, because abuse now starts, it's starting so early, you know, in relationships. It's just.
Yeah, because we tell the little girls, you know, with our little girls, if the boys are hitting on the little girls or pulling their hair, we tell them, well, he just likes you.
He likes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't know how to express it. He just likes you. Oh, don't pay it any.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we get to be a grown woman in an abusive relationship, we can tend to confuse aggression.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have heard women say, I just didn't believe he loved me unless he hit me.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And I just, that's unfortunate.
It's very.
I want us to talk about some of the challenges with domestic violence, particularly, you know, if the victim is older or the same sex relationships. And then let's talk about that safety plan. You talked about that on the show before, you know, when someone makes up their mind, maybe we shouldn't skip to the safety plan without talking about, and I don't know what you do with your clients and, you know, and how you work with the people that you work with and some of the things that you might say to them about getting out, you know, to influence how they see the situation so that they will decide that it's time to get out. I think we're up on a break, aren't we, Nicole?
We are.
We are on break, so we're going to be right back on 94.7 FM. Welcome back. We are still here with Gwen Turner, and we're talking domestic violence. Let's talk about the same-sex relationships. Have you experienced any situations with those types of couples? Have you worked with those type of couples? Do you know some of the things that they go through?
Yes. Well, first of all, abuse is everywhere. So yes, their numbers are on the rise as well. And a lot of times I heard one person I was talking to regarding their situation before court. And one of the things that they talked about their relationship, the relationship was always tense and intense because of pressures coming from the outside families because it was a same-sex relationship.
Got it.
So they felt like that was the impact because of the negative vibes that they were getting from family members, that it bleeded over into their household because they did live together. And it's very hard a lot of times for law enforcement to determine who's the aggressor in that. And also there was another sensitivity training as it related to that. Because they didn't treat a lot of people in the LGBTQ community felt like law enforcement was not going to take their cases seriously.
I can get that.
A lot of times, so a lot of times they would be afraid to report the abuse, which in some cases caused them to stay in the abuse and continue to be abused over and over and over and over again. So because they felt like they really had no resource or place to go where they would be treated in a justifiable way. Yeah.
I was looking at these statistics, and a 2015 study found that 22% of transgender respondents had been harassed by law enforcement, 6% reported being physically assaulted, and 46% reported feeling uncomfortable seeking police assistance. So I think that speaks to exactly what you were just describing to us.
Yeah, yeah. So it's better now, but it's not nearly where it should be. Because if I call law enforcement, regardless of if I'm a victim, I'm a victim, whoever I am. So yeah. And you mentioned the, go ahead.
What do you say to someone? You know, what do you say to someone? And then what is someone like me that's not knowledgeable enough, right? And not an expert in the area, that you feel is in that type of situation? How do we, how do you influence? Because like you said early on, the abuser has to admit that they are abusive, and the victim has to admit that they are a victim of abuse.
Right.
I mean, I can just see myself looking at someone thinking, now he or she knows they're being abused. That's, that would be my mindset. But maybe it's not theirs.
Yeah, maybe they don't know. And the best thing we can do as people on the outside of the relationship is listen, even if they don't admit it. Because for a victim to admit that they are in an abusive relationship, when that finally is verbalized, you know then that they're at their wits' end. They're on the way down. It's gonna spiral down, because that's one of the hardest things to admit. Once you admit it to yourself, it's one thing. But when you have to say to somebody else, something is going wrong, I'm being abused, or I'm being hit, or whatever's going on, that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of courage. If that person is not admitting and you suspect, or because sometimes we know and the victim still won't admit it. The only thing you can do is just be encouraging until that person comes to the realization. Because the mistake that we make so many times is saying, look, you don't need to be here. Or look, you need to stop this madness. Or look, you need to do this and you need to do that. And the only thing we're doing is building a wedge. So when they do get ready to verbalize it, you're going to be the last person that they come to. But if you just say stuff like, I got you, I'm with you. If you need me, call me, and leave it at that. Not try to take it into a full conversation, not try, because sometimes when you make those encouraging statements to them, the first time they may say, oh, okay. And then on down the line, as you keep encouraging them, they may open up a little more. But they have to make the first step. That's very important, because if not, they're going to shy away or they're going to shut down.
Right.
So, and now once they open up to you, then, hey, we need to start with a safety plan. What would you like for me to do? How can I help you? And not throwing out just a whole lot of suggestions at one time,
Have you, in your position, over the last year and a half, or actually we're coming up on 2 years since the pandemic started, have you noticed or observed much of an increase in
absolutely
violence? Yeah,
absolutely. Because when the pandemic hit, so many things were going on. Keep in mind, you already know that you're in a pandemic and you're in an abusive relationship. So nobody can go to work. When work was my refuge, work was the time I could get out of that hostile environment. And even though I'm at work, I got some kind of peace, about me, or at least I'm by myself. Or whatever the case, my mind is somewhere else. But now I'm in the same household. We can't go anywhere. He can't go to work. She can't go to work. Then we lose our jobs, or one person loses their job. And so there's no money. So you're compounding all of these, it's just it was a bad poison. So yes, the domestic violence increased, the violence intensified, the abuse intensified. And we felt the effect. We felt the effect. The domestic violence shelters remain full with the waiting list.
Wow.
Remained full with
And that's kind of how it
hard.
is with our children. Same for our children.
Absolutely.
The schools where they're saving. Yeah.
And then and that was about to be my next statement. When you had children who were also in the middle of all of this, so everybody's at home.
Right.
There were some people experiencing some terrible situations. I mean, we got calls. At that point, I was working at the Crime Victim Center, doing orders of protections and things like that. But we
I think we lost her for a minute.
Okay.
So we're here with Miss Gwen Turner. We're talking domestic violence. While we are waiting on her to come back, I'd really like for us to give those numbers. The crisis hotline number is 1-800-334-4628. That is 1-800-334-4628. And then there is a text line, and that text line is 615-983-5170. I think we got her back. I think we got you back.
Was that mine?
It was. So we were sharing the crisis hotline number while you were away. So let's talk about the safety plan. Let's talk about how you create a safety plan, and how you can protect your avenues of communication as you're doing so.
Once, one of the first things that I do when I'm talking to victims who may not be ready to come out, but making that plan, because now we're finding that, I can't go to you and say, Rhonda girl, get out and get out today.
Yeah.
Because these people have another mindset and they come behind you and shoot you, so it's very important to get a plan. If there are children involved, what you need to do is make a copy of everything: your driver's license, birth certificates, social security cards, everything that you're going to need to start over, to possibly get a new apartment, to get a car, to get the children in school, shot records. Find a way to make copies of all of that and give it to someone you can trust. Make sure that that you have all of that in one place. Start putting money somewhere, if at all possible. If you're working, start calling resources where you can find help with different agencies. There are so many agencies out there that will help you in this transition of trying to get out. Start looking at, when you leave home, I always tell people, turn your location off.
Yeah.
On your phone. Most people who are being stalked, they're being stalked, one, because of social media, two, because they have settings on their phone that pings with your partner's phone that lets them know everywhere you go, how long you're there and all that. So turn the locator off. get another phone, a prepaid phone, a something like that. Get just another little cheap phone, because you may have to discard that phone.
Mhm.
Things like that. Find a person that you can trust. You got a person that you can trust with all of your important documents and things of this nature. So at that point, once you've done that, you can start telling people. You may have to tell the people on your job, your manager. You know, it just depends on your situation. Hey, this is what I'm getting ready to do. I don't want to go into all the details of why I'm doing that, but please do not disclose this information to anyone.
And maybe the same thing for your children's schools.
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask this question then. So if I were that woman or man and I went to my manager on my job, you know, are they obligated to keep that information confidential?
Yes, to a certain degree, especially if the situation where the person has to get an order of protection against their partner, if they've gone that far to get an order of protection, then yes, legally they are bound, because they're going to get a copy of that order of protection and say your employee here, da 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 da. So that
because I can imagine at that point I'm paranoid about everybody, right? So
absolutely. And then I would request my if it were me, there's a thing that called authorization of agency, or AOA, where that person would not be able to come on the property of your employment. So little things like that. But it usually, when you, and with your children, one of the safety things that you can do, because suppose the fight breaks out and you find you got to leave in the middle of the night. There are little things, if you got children there, and you need to say, if you hear mama holler elephant, that means jump up and run outside and go call the police. Or if you hear mama holler, whatever, you know, so little things like that in the planning stages. Putting away things, it's not always wise to just up and disappear.
Yeah. What about technology? So should you be making sure that if you visit the domestic violence website, should you be making sure that you take the steps to erase the, history? Or
I would not even, I mean, I know that I would not even do that on my personal. I would say, hey, Nicole, let me borrow your phone.
Okay.
This is what I'm going to do. This is that person, that one person that you think you can trust, or you feel you can trust, or go to the library, go somewhere else and do the searches, especially if you have someone who we have to tell people now, depending on the severity of the abuse, go to the police station and get your car sweeped. Because you can buy these little trackers and they put it up under the tire. You're not gonna see it.
Yeah.
And they know everywhere you're going.
And so the police station will do that for someone.
They should. They're supposed to. It's a way to get it done. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, there's a way that they can. And then a good mechanic can also do that. Because they hide them, and they're so small, but they will track you everywhere you go. When I was working in Family Safety Center, we had one guy, I mean, he just had to not have a whole lot of marbles, because he followed her there and sat in the parking lot.
Wow.
And the police just went down and arrested him in his car. And while they were on the parking lot, they found the tracker on the back of her truck.
Wow. We are just about out of time. I'd really like for you to take about 30 seconds and just offer us some final thoughts.
My final thoughts would be, if you feel like you're going through some kind of domestic violence situation, 9 times out of 10, you are. If it doesn't feel right in your soul, in your gut, in your mind, if you have any questions about your feelings and how this person makes you feel, then you're probably experiencing some kind of domestic violence. There are many agencies here that you can reach out to get help. If you think, call someone. Know that you can rise above the demon of domestic violence. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. I would not lie to you and tell you that it's an easy process, especially when your heart is involved. But it's a possible process, and you can rise above it and be bold and beautiful, just like me.
Gwen, my bold and beautiful friend, I love you and I thank you
I love you so much.
so much for coming back. And you know we got to have you back
Absolutely.
again. I know it's always hard for
Absolutely.
you to make time, and I get it, but you know, we need to keep this topic in the forefront.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Dr.
You are
West.
so welcome. Thank you for having me, and it's always a blast. I love you so much, sister.
I know you do, and I love you back. And we thank you guys
right.
for coming back to be with us. Same chat channel, same chat time, and we will see you next Saturday at the same time right here on 94.7 FM.